I trusted my daughter's new husband like family, until the day he showed up at my door with a notary and said, "We've sold your house, you're moving out today." In that moment, the man I'd welcomed into my home turned into a stranger, and everything I thought I could rely on, love, loyalty, even blood, fractured like glass. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It walks in wearing a smile and holding a wedding ring. And when the people you love most start seeing you as an obstacle instead of family, the only thing left to protect isn't property. It's your dignity. Before we dive into today's story, I recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I've lived in Meridian, Idaho, long enough to watch empty wheat fields turn into cul-de-sacs and coffee shops. My ranch-style house sits at the end of Birch Hollow Lane, one story, cedar siding the color of burnt honey, with a workshop tacked on behind it. I built most of it myself back when my hands were steadier and my knees didn't complain every time I knelt on the floor. Inside the shop, the smell of pine dust still reminds me of Nora, my wife, my partner, gone 4 years now. Every morning I sweep the shavings from the bench, as if she might walk in and fuss that I left a mess. Life since then has been simple: black coffee, the Idaho Statesman spread on the kitchen table, a slow walk down to the mailbox, a quiet evening with the radio humming old country songs. Some nights I write a few lines in the leather journal she gave me for our 30th anniversary. It's my way of talking to her without looking foolish. People say retirement gets lonely, but loneliness is only heavy when there's no rhythm. Mine still has one, measured, reliable, like the ticking of the wall clock above the stove. My daughter, Emily, worries about me more than she should. She teaches kindergarten in Boise, and every Sunday she drives down, bringing fresh cookies or leftover art projects from her class. She has Nora's kindness, and unfortunately, her tendency to feel responsible for everyone. After her divorce 3 years ago, I watched her lose that spark that once filled every room. Then, last spring, she introduced me to him, Darren Cole, 37, sharp dresser, a smile that looked printed straight from a real estate brochure. He shook my hand with confidence, called me sir, and within 10 minutes managed to compliment both my house and the neighborhood's impressive market appreciation. I should have paid attention then, but I was too busy noticing how Emily laughed again, really laughed, for the first time in years. Darren said he was a real estate consultant, helping families invest wisely. He talked smooth, never quite lying, just making every sentence sound like a promise. Emily glowed beside him, and that glow blinded me. When he asked to marry her that fall, I didn't hesitate. She deserved a restart. I was ready to believe in one. The wedding took place at St. Paul's Chapel, the same church where Nora and I had renewed our vows on our 25th. The October sunlight streamed through stained glass, spilling color across the pews. I paid for the flowers, the hall, even the band, happy to give Emily the celebration she'd missed the first time. During my short toast, I mentioned how proud Nora would be, how life sometimes circles back to give us another chance. My throat closed halfway through, but the crowd clapped kindly. Darren raised his glass and said, "To family," his voice smooth as varnish. He called me Dad that night. I didn't know that word could feel so warm, and later so cold. For a few days after the wedding, the house felt alive again. Emily and Darren stayed over while they waited for their apartment paperwork to finish. She filled the kitchen with the smell of cinnamon rolls. He helped me carry in the firewood, chatting about property taxes and the city's expansion plans. He asked if I ever thought about downsizing, said smaller homes were easier to manage at my age. I laughed it off, thinking he meant well. He was, after all, a professional who probably couldn't help talking shop. That night, after they'd gone upstairs, I walked out to the workshop. The air was crisp, scented with pine and the faint smoke from distant chimneys. I turned on the single hanging bulb and looked at the wall of tools, each one in its place. Square, level, plain. Order comforts me. I picked up the frame I'd built for Nora's photograph and dusted the glass. She was smiling the way she did when I first finished this house, proud and certain of our future. She would have liked him, I whispered, though the words sounded less true than I wanted. Morning came bright and clean. I poured coffee, looked out the kitchen window, and saw Darren pacing along the front porch, counting steps, glancing at the roofline. He waved when he noticed me watching, said something to Emily I couldn't hear. I forced a smile back and pretended to focus on the mug in my hand. Maybe he was just admiring craftsmanship, I told myself. Maybe I was imagining things. Before heading to the workshop, I opened my journal and wrote, "Emily finally looks happy again. That's all that matters." Still, as I capped the pen, my eyes wandered around the room, to the old photo albums stacked near the hearth, to the creak of the floorboard Nora used to call the house's heartbeat. The morning light felt slightly colder than usual. For no reason I could name, I found myself locking the front door twice before stepping outside. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that you ignored the warning signs, stay with me, because what happens next will make you question just how well we ever know the people closest to us. 2 mornings after the wedding, Meridian felt sharper somehow, the air thinner, the light more brittle. A front had rolled through overnight, leaving the maple leaves plastered to the sidewalk like damp gold coins. I poured my coffee and stood by the kitchen window, expecting the calm that usually came with that first sip. Instead, I saw Darren outside, pacing along the porch with his phone in one hand, counting steps like a man measuring lumber. He crouched near the gutter, snapped a photo, straightened, and moved toward the side yard where Nora's lilacs had grown for decades. Emily followed behind, holding her jacket closed against the chill, her face caught between a smile and apology. They looked like a couple on a Sunday walk, if you ignored the way he kept glancing at the roofline instead of the sky. I watched him stretch his arm to mark the width of the deck railing, then jot something into his phone. When he noticed me at the window, he waved, all teeth and cheer, and I forced a polite nod back. A harmless habit, I told myself. Real estate people measure things the way fishermen check the wind. They can't help it. Still, I couldn't shake the image of a stranger mapping my home like a property under appraisal. We ate lunch together later, a quiet meal broken only by the clink of forks on plates. Darren talked about the housing market, about how Meridian was booming faster than people realize. He mentioned families from California paying cash for places smaller than mine. If we help your dad move somewhere cozier, he said lightly, he could relax more, less to maintain. Emily smiled at him, then turned to me. He's just worried about you being here alone all the time. I smiled back because that was the easiest thing to do. I'll manage fine, I said, keeping my voice steady. Been doing it for years. Darren nodded, as if I'd confirmed a statistic, not a boundary. The rest of the meal slipped by in small talk. When they left the table, I sat a moment longer, staring at the groove Nora's ring had worn into the wood. That afternoon, while sweeping the workshop, I remembered something she once said after we'd met a pushy insurance salesman. Watch the ones who measure before they ask permission. The line surfaced like a nail rising through old floorboards. Darren's polite tone, his casual interest, it all fit too neatly. I wrote it down in my notebook before bed. He's polite, but his eyes never rest. That's not curiosity, it's calculation. The next morning dawned pale and windy. I stepped onto the porch to fetch the newspaper and nearly stepped on a bright orange flyer wedged under the doormat. Cash for homes. Close in 7 days. The edges were crisp, the ink fresh. Someone had placed it carefully, not tossed it. The company name was one I'd never heard of. Gem State Buyers, LLC, with a Boise address and a hotline number. The sort of thing that usually ends up in the trash without a thought. But this one felt personal, like a whisper through the mail slot. I glanced up and down the street. Hank Jefferson was walking his dog 2 houses over, gave me a wave, no one suspicious. I folded the flyer and slid it into my shirt pocket instead of the bin. The paper felt heavier than it should. All day I tried to shake the unease. Emily and Darren went out to run errands. I stayed behind, fixing the loose leg on an old chair. Every strike of the hammer echoed louder than usual. The rhythmic thud filled the workshop. but it couldn't drown out the question forming in my mind. What exactly does he see when he looks at this place? Not my life, not my memories, probably just equity and square footage. When twilight came, I turned off the radio and stepped outside. The street lamps had just flickered on, and the sky glowed the soft gray blue of brushed steel. Through the living room window, I could see the outline of that orange flyer where I'd set it on the desk beside Nora's photo. Her smile in the glass seemed to shift with the light, as if she were watching me think. Maybe I was overreacting, maybe I'd lived alone too long, and suspicion had started to fill the empty chairs. Still, before heading upstairs, I opened my journal and wrote, "Maybe I'm just overthinking," or maybe Nora's whispering again. I closed the book, switched off the lamp, and let the house settle into silence. Outside, the porch light spilled across the desk, catching the edge of the folded flyer. It glowed faintly in the dark, like a warning sign I wasn't ready to read. If you're still watching and you believe that sometimes silence hides the loudest kind of betrayal, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're with me, because this is where things start to shift. By Thursday afternoon, the week had slipped back into its quiet rhythm. I'd spent the morning at Home Depot, buying varnish and a new chisel set I didn't really need. The drive home felt ordinary, the kind of simple comfort that makes you think everything's fine again. The sky over Meridian was thin and gold, the kind of light that flattens the world into peace. Then I turned onto Birch Hollow Lane and saw the black SUV parked sideways across my driveway. A man in a pressed shirt stood beside it, a clipboard in hand. His name tag caught the light, Mobile Notary, Vince Morales. Inside my house, through the open front door, I could see Darren and Emily at the kitchen table. Emily was holding a pot of coffee. Darren was spreading out a stack of papers. For a second, the scene looked domestic, almost wholesome, until I noticed the embossed seals on the documents and the pen poised over a signature line with my name typed underneath. When I stepped inside, Darren greeted me with the kind of warmth used to sell cars. "Dad, you're just in time. Vince is helping us with a few routine papers." Vince smiled politely. "Standard form, sir. Nothing serious, just a durable power of attorney. Makes emergencies easier." I set my bag down slowly, eyes on the top sheet. The title read, "Durable Power of Attorney and Property Transfer Agreement." The words hit me like cold water. I met Darren's eyes. His smile didn't reach them. "Anything involving my property," I said evenly, "doesn't happen without my lawyer's eyes on it first." Emily hesitated, her voice soft. "Maybe we should let Dad think about it, honey." The air between us tightened. Darren's jaw flexed before he gave a rehearsed chuckle. "Of course. Just trying to keep things organized." He gathered the papers too quickly and thanked Vince for his time. They left a minute later, Darren's hand resting a little too firmly on Emily's shoulder as they stepped outside. For a long while, I didn't move. The kitchen smelled of burnt coffee and printer ink. On the table sat a ring from Vince's travel mug, perfectly round, already drying. I cleaned it off, then noticed the faint outline where the papers had rested. Tiny flecks of embossed gold from the notary seal, pressed into the wood like residue from a battle I hadn't realized I'd entered. A knock came at the door. It was Hank Jefferson from next door, his old army jacket zipped to the chin. "Howard," he said, "you should know, yesterday your son-in-law brought another guy here while you were out." I frowned. "What guy?" Didn't catch his name. Looked like one of those home inspectors. They were out back for nearly an hour, taking pictures, measuring the yard. "I figured you knew." My stomach turned. I didn't. Hank's expression softened. "Then maybe keep an eye out. Folks these days think a handshake still means something. It doesn't." He gave my shoulder a quick pat before heading back down the path with his dog. Inside, I set my shopping bags aside and opened my laptop. Years in maintenance had taught me that every system leaves a record. I opened the browser history. There it was. Searches I hadn't made. Property appraisers Ada County, quick cash house buyers Idaho, power of attorney elderly homeowners. Each entry carried yesterday's date and hour. Someone had been using my computer while I was out. I took screenshots of everything and copied them to a flash drive. Then I reached for my old spiral-bound technician's notebook and started logging details: time, description, witnesses. The handwriting came back steady, mechanical, the same way I used to record electrical faults at the county office. It calmed me, having data to hold instead of anger. When the list was done, I picked up the phone and called Alicia Grant, my attorney. She answered on the second ring, brisk and alert. "They tried to get me to sign something," I said. "A notary was here. Papers about property transfer." Her tone sharpened instantly. "Do not sign anything, Mr. Blake. Keep copies or photos if you can. Lock up every document that mentions the house. I want you in my office at 9 tomorrow morning." Before we hung up, she added quietly, "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's the first stage of a takeover. Stay alert." After I hung up, the house seemed to shrink around me. The evening light crawled across the walls, touching every photograph, every dented nail Nora had once tapped into place. I went out to the workshop, set the flash drive in a small tin box, and slid it under the workbench. For a long time, I sat in the half-dark, listening to the creak of the wood as the temperature dropped. "I've fixed houses, repaired engines, patched what was broken," I murmured, "but I never learned how to fix trust." The words hung in the air, half prayer, half confession. Before leaving, I scribbled a note and pinned it to the bulletin board above the bench. "Begin documentation, trust but verify." Then I switched off the lights. The ticking of the wall clock filled the silence, marking the start of something I hadn't chosen but couldn't avoid. If you think manipulation always comes with red flags, think again, because this next turn proves that the most dangerous traps are often disguised as kindness. The next morning arrived wrapped in fog so thick it looked like the whole street was holding its breath. I woke before dawn, though sleep had never really taken hold. The coffee pot gurgled to life while I sat at the table, watching the first streaks of gray light touch the yard. The air smelled like wet cedar and cold metal. Something inside me had shifted overnight. The panic was gone, replaced by a strange mechanical calm, like a man who finally knows which wrench to use. I gathered everything: screenshots, Hank's account, photos of the tire tracks from that black SUV, and even a picture of the faint notary stamp on my kitchen table. Each file got printed, labeled, and stored in a manila envelope. Then I duplicated every digital piece onto 2 USB drives, one tucked into my work jacket, the other taped behind the panel of my old toolbox. I caught my reflection in the window above the sink, the fog outside swallowing the fence where Darren had measured just days ago. "You'd tell me to stay smart, wouldn't you, Nora?" I said softly. Her picture on the fridge didn't answer, but it didn't need to. By 8:15, I was on the highway toward Boise. The drive felt like moving through static. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my thoughts buzzed. I kept seeing Darren's polite smile, the glint of the notary's seal, Emily's uncertain eyes. Every mile brought me closer to something I hadn't planned for. A war fought with paperwork and proof instead of nails and lumber. Alicia Grant's office sat in a brick building downtown, clean lines and glass that reflected the pale sky. Inside, it smelled of coffee and lemon polish. Alicia herself was exactly how she'd sounded on the phone: early 40s, composed, the kind of person who could read a contract and a person in the same breath. She gestured for me to sit and slid on her glasses. "Show me what you've got, Mr. Blake." I laid everything out on her desk like evidence from a crime scene. She moved through the files in silence, only her pen tapping now and then. After 10 minutes, she looked up, her expression sharpening. "He's not just greedy," she said. "This looks premeditated. See this search pattern? This isn't random curiosity, it's reconnaissance." She flipped through another printout, her eyes narrowing. Darren could be connected to a known group that targets older homeowners. They use corrupted notaries, fake appraisals, power of attorney tricks, whatever works fast enough before families catch on. The words hit me with a mixture of dread and clarity. "So this is organized?" "Very," she said. "And you're his next step. But you're also his mistake, Mr. Blake, because you caught it early." She outlined a plan with the precision of an architect. First, I was not to let Darren know I had legal help. Second, no emotional confrontations, just play along. Third, she'd contact Detective Laura Chen, who had been investigating similar scams across the state. If he pushes again, let him, Alicia said, sliding a small recorder across the table. We'll be ready. You mean play along? Exactly. Give him rope. Her voice was calm but final, like a blueprint already signed off by the city inspector. When I got home, the fog had lifted. The house looked normal again, almost too normal, like a stage after the actors have left. I checked every lock, every drawer, the safe, the garage door. Then I began installing the small cameras Alicia had provided. One behind the bookshelf, another near the kitchen clock, a third above the hallway vent. My old electrician's hands worked fast. Muscle memory from decades of wiring things to last. As I was setting the last one, I noticed something odd under my workbench. A tiny black device with a blinking red light. A recorder. Someone, likely Darren, had already been listening. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the slow burn of anger rise. Then I smiled. Instead of removing it, I rerouted its wire to a separate battery pack I'd rigged with a looping noise file. An hour of nothing but static and the hum of the refrigerator. Let him think he still had control. That evening, Emily stopped by with a box of bakery muffins. Darren feels awful, Dad, she said, her voice small. He just wants to make things right. I met her eyes and saw it, loyalty tangled with fear. She wanted to believe the best of him, the way I once had. Tell him I'm fine, I said quietly. Some things take time. After she left, I went out to the garage. The camera's live feed glowed on my laptop, each room captured in perfect silence. My reflection flickered in the screen, older but steadier. I picked up the note I'd written the night before. Begin documentation. Trust but verify. It felt less like advice now and more like a declaration. He thought I was an old man fading. He forgot I built every nail in this house, and I still know how to reinforce what's worth keeping. 2 days passed like the slow tightening of a screw. The air around my house carried a tension I could feel in my chest. The phone rang twice each morning. No caller ID, just silence on the other end. Yesterday, someone in a blue jacket had come to the porch claiming to look for Maple Avenue, though my street signs were plain as day. He'd glanced around the property too long before leaving. Then this morning, I opened the mailbox and found an envelope from Gem State Buyers, LLC, the same company name I'd seen in Darren's search history. The message inside was short. We're ready to close whenever you are. That was when I knew. His move had begun. Around 3 that afternoon, the sound of tires on gravel pulled me to the window. Darren's black SUV rolled into the driveway like it owned the place. He didn't call ahead. He didn't need to. He stepped out wearing that smug half smile I used to mistake for confidence. A folder was tucked under his arm. Afternoon, Dad, he said as if we were meeting for coffee. Got something good to show you. Va. I left the door half open, just wide enough for the camera behind the bookshelf to capture everything. He set the folder on the dining table, flipping through crisp, official-looking papers. It's an offer, he said, sliding the top page toward me. A great one. The house is worth more now than ever. I made arrangements with a buyer who will pay cash. You could move somewhere easier, maybe travel. I read the bold title, Offer to Purchase Property, Immediate Closing. My name was printed in large font. I didn't need to ask how he'd gotten it. You've been busy, I said, keeping my voice calm. He smiled wider. Just helping family, you know. Sometimes you need someone younger to handle things. You mean someone greedy enough to sell what isn't his? The smile faltered. For a heartbeat, the room felt too small for both of us. Then he laughed, sharp and joyless. You think this house will last forever? You won't, Howard. Houses outlive people. You can't take it with you. He was right about one thing. I wasn't going to take it. I was going to make damn sure he couldn't either. When he excused himself to use the bathroom, I noticed his phone on the table, screen lighting with a new message. I shouldn't have looked, but instinct overrode decency. The text glowed bright. All ready, County records will show transfer once doc is filed. MBI froze. MB. Those initials belong to Martin Brooks, a man I knew from the county records office. We'd played poker years back before Nora passed. Now, he was part of this too. I felt something in me harden. When Darren returned, I was waiting. I tossed the gem-state envelope onto the table. "I know about your buyers," I said, "and I know about Brooks." He blinked once, then smirked. "You've been spying on me? You're losing it, old man." "Maybe, but I'm not the one about to lose his freedom." His face changed, small cracks forming in his carefully built charm. I caught the twitch in his jaw, the slight tremor of his hand as he reached for the folder. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. "Then tell me," I said, leaning forward. "Did you record everything too?" That got him. His eyes darted sideways, just enough to confirm what I already knew. He had bugged this house before, and now he knew I knew. The silence that followed was a kind of violence, a war fought in stillness. Finally, he snapped. "You'll regret this," he spat, slamming the folder shut. "You think you can stop what's already in motion?" Papers scattered across the floor, some sliding beneath the table. Right then, Emily walked in from the porch, a grocery bag in her arms. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice small. Darren turned too quickly, forcing a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Your dad's just confused again." I didn't speak. I only reached down, picked up one of the fallen sheets, and handed it to her. "Maybe you should finally see who your husband really is." She looked down. The document was a property transfer agreement. Under the witness line was her own signature, forged, perfect, and dated 3 days earlier. The color drained from her face. "Darren," she whispered, "what is this?" He took a step toward her, hands raised. It's not what you think." But she'd already dropped the paper, stepping back as though it burned her. I watched it flutter to the floor, landing face up in the pool of afternoon light. The faint red glow of the camera hidden above the bookshelf blinked twice, recording everything. The lies, the betrayal, the exact moment the mask slipped. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the one being watched. For a few seconds after the papers hit the floor, the house stopped breathing. The afternoon light had gone thin and gray, pressing against the windows like fogged glass. Emily stood frozen beside the table, her hands trembling, her eyes darting from me to Darren and back again. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint click of the hidden camera recording every moment. Darren was the first to speak. "Emily," he said softly, the way a salesman lowers his voice before sealing a deal, "you have to understand. I did this for us, for our future. Your dad's comfortable. He doesn't need this place. We could have had something better." She shook her head, tears spilling before she could stop them. "You forged my name, Darren. You lied to me. You lied to him." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I didn't lie," he insisted, voice rising, edges showing. "I was fixing things. You said you were worried about money after your last school cutbacks. I was just trying to help." I stepped forward, my own voice low but steady. "You didn't just steal my house, son. You tried to steal my daughter's trust." The words hit him like a slap. His face twisted, and for the first time, the mask slipped entirely. "You think anyone will believe you?" he spat. "You're an old man, Howard. Everyone knows what happens to people your age. Memories fade, stories change. You won't even remember this right." In a month, I felt my pulse slow instead of race. "Then let's put my memory on record," I said. He blinked, uncertain. That was when I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out a small black flip phone, the kind I'd kept from my years in maintenance, indestructible and old-fashioned. I pressed a button, and the tinny speaker came alive with his own voice. "County records will show transfer once the doc is filed. MB." Then my voice, steady as steel on the recording. "Martin Brooks, you sure this will pass review?" Darren's laughter filled the room from the recording, smooth, confident, impossible to mistake. "Relax, they'll think the old man signed it himself." The real Darren went pale. How did you get that?" "You planted your little microphone in my workshop," I said quietly. "It worked both ways. Every word you said came through loud and clear. My lawyer and the police both have copies. He stared at me, realizing he was cornered. Emily stepped back, her face hollow with shock. You recorded him? She whispered. Yes, I said, because he planned to take everything from us. Darren turned on me, eyes wide and furious. You're bluffing. You can't have proof. That's illegal surveillance. Illegal? I smiled faintly. So is forgery, fraud, and conspiracy with a county records officer. He took a step toward me, then stopped when he saw the phone's red recording light still blinking. His mouth opened and closed, searching for a script that no longer existed. Emily's voice broke through the tension. I can't believe I married you. Darren's shoulders slumped, his tone shifting again, pleading, desperate. Emily, please. I did it for us. We could pay off your debts, travel, start over somewhere warm. I wasn't stealing. It was an investment. She turned away, pressing her hands to her face. I could see the quiet collapse happening in her, the moment when love curdles into clarity. I walked to the window, looked out at the driveway. You have 24 hours, I said. You can go to the police yourself, tell them the truth, or wait until they come for you. The evidence is already filed. How this ends is up to you. He glared at me. You'll regret crossing me. No, I said. I regret trusting you. He didn't answer. The room filled with the scraping sound of his chair as he shoved it back. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Emily flinched but didn't move. We both listened to the engine roar to life outside, then fade down the road, swallowed by the wind. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "What happens now?" Now, I said, we wait for him to show what kind of man he really is. When she left for her friend's house, I sat in the quiet living room, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with sawdust and old coffee. I watched the live feed on my laptop, every room calm again, every red light steady. Outside, the sky darkened. The first drops of rain began to hit the porch roof, slow and heavy. He thinks he still has time, I thought, but every minute now belongs to me. The morning after the storm, the world outside looked scrubbed raw. Puddles glittered in the driveway, and the maple leaves clung to the wet pavement like bruised coins. I woke before sunrise, the ache in my chest heavy but clear. The fight was over, at least the first one. I made coffee and started picking up the papers scattered across the living room. Some were warped from last night's rain that had crept in through the cracked window. The air smelled of damp wood and burnt dust from the heater kicking on. Emily hadn't come home. The silence that used to be peaceful now felt like a warning. My phone buzzed on the table, a message from Alicia. Received all files. Police looped in. Expect contact from Detective Laura Chen soon. I exhaled, relief and dread tangled together. The gears of something bigger had started turning now. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Until then, my job was to stay calm, act normal, and keep breathing. Around noon, I was in the garage sanding a chair leg when the computer pinged with a new email. The subject line read, "Drive safe tonight, old man." The sender's address was a random jumble of letters, but the body was short, just one line. Accidents happen. Attached was a photo of my house taken in the dark, porch light glowing faintly, a silhouette of a car parked across the street. The timestamp was 2:14 a.m. My stomach turned cold. Darren wasn't just angry, he was watching. I printed the photo, scribbled the time and date beneath it, then taped it inside my notebook under a new heading, Threat Escalation. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. After a deep breath, I called Alicia. She answered on the second ring. "Stay put," she said immediately. "I'm calling the detective now. Don't open the door for anyone." By 3 o'clock, a dark sedan pulled into my drive. A woman stepped out, mid-40s maybe, sharp eyes behind square glasses, wearing a long gray coat that made her look more like a professor than a cop. "Mr. Blake?" she asked, flashing her badge. "Detective Laura Chen. Mind if I come in?" We sat in the kitchen while she went through the files Alicia had forwarded. Her tone was calm but focused. She took photos of the threatening email, the printed picture, even the deep tire marks still visible on the wet gravel outside. "This isn't random," she said finally. "We've been tracking a property fraud ring operating across 3 counties. Darren's name connects to at least 2 others. He's not just an opportunist, he's a recruiter." I stared at the steam curling from my coffee. "So, why isn't he in handcuffs yet?" She met my gaze evenly. "Because we need him to act again. The moment he makes his next move, we can prove intent, conspiracy, and wire fraud. Right now, he still thinks you're scared. That's our leverage." "Meaning what?" I asked. "Meaning we let him think he's winning." When she left, the house felt heavier, but the fear had shifted shape. It wasn't the kind that froze me anymore. It was the kind that waited. Night came early. The rain started again, gentle but steady. I sat at the kitchen table, the lights low, listening to the clock tick. I couldn't stop thinking of Emily, her silence, her tears, the way she'd looked at me before walking out. I thought of Nora too, her laughter echoing in the back of my mind. I protected her from scraped knees and heartbreak, I wrote in my notebook, but not from the man she married. Around 9, I stepped outside for air. The cold bit into my lungs. That's when I noticed it. A second set of tire tracks by the back gate. Smaller tread, not from Darren's SUV. I knelt, touched the wet impression. Fresh. Someone else had been here. Inside the mailbox, tucked between bills, was a folded piece of paper with 3 words written in clean block letters. "Stay quiet, engineer." The word hit me harder than the threat. Only a few people knew I'd been an electrical engineer before retirement. Darren wasn't one of them. This wasn't just his work. There were others. I photographed the note, sent it to Alicia and Detective Chen. Within minutes, a reply came back. "Got it. Stay calm. This confirms a wider ring. We may ask for your help soon. Chen." I sat back, watching the cursor blink on the screen. The thought came slowly, then all at once. If this was bigger than one man, then maybe I wasn't just a target. I was bait. At 10:42 p.m., I opened a blank email to Chen and typed, "If you need me to help draw them out, I'm ready. If it keeps others safe." Before hitting send, I looked around the house. The framed photos, the worn furniture, the faint smell of sawdust that never really left. The place felt alive, as if it too was holding its breath with me. I pressed send, closed the laptop, and turned off the lights. Only the soft red glow of the camera in the hallway remained, painting the room in its silent pulse. They wanted an old man to be their victim, I thought. I'll be their lesson instead. The next morning, Meridian was painted in gray light and frost. The air outside my window looked sharp enough to cut skin. I drove into town and parked behind the post office, where Alicia and Detective Laura Chen were waiting in a quiet corner of a diner that smelled like burnt toast and old coffee. Alicia slid a folder across the table. "This is it," she said. "You're going to agree to sell. Or at least make him believe you will." Chen leaned forward, voice calm but precise. "We'll have you wired through this." She placed a pen on the table, sleek, heavy, metallic. "Camera in the clip, microphone inside. Transmits to our van half a mile away. Battery life, 6 hours." I picked it up. It felt like something Nora would have given me for my retirement. Solid, simple, deceptively ordinary. "And what do I say?" I asked. Alicia smiled faintly. "Say what he needs to hear. Let him believe you have given up." I stared at the steam swirling above my coffee. "So I play the fool." Chen nodded. "Exactly. Play tired. Be compliant. Let him think he's smarter than you. That's when people talk the most." I met her eyes. "He'll bring someone from the county." "A man named Martin Brooks," she jotted the name down. "Good. That's the link we've needed. Once we have them both in the same room, we'll have enough for a warrant." Alicia added softly, "Howard, are you sure you want to do this? It's risky. If he realizes—" "I'm sure," I said. My voice didn't shake. "They started this game. I'll be the one to end it. Back home, the house felt smaller, more deliberate, like every corner had a purpose now. Chen's tech team had come earlier and set up a live relay. Their van would park 2 blocks away during the meeting. I spent the afternoon rehearsing lines in front of the mirror. I practiced the hesitation, the quiver in my voice, the sigh of surrender. I even rubbed my hands with a little cold water to make them tremble. One more lie for the truth, I whispered to my reflection. Around sunset, my phone rang. Darren's name glowed on the screen. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Dad," he began, tone soft, almost apologetic. "Maybe we both said things we didn't mean. Let's talk tomorrow. I'll bring someone from the county to clear things up. No lawyers, no drama, just family." He was careful not to mention names, but I already knew. "All right, son," I said. "Maybe I overreacted. We'll settle it like men." He chuckled, relief flooding his words. "I knew you'd see sense." After hanging up, I sat in the quiet house and watched the light fade from the walls. Tomorrow would end this, one way or another. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind scraped along the windows like nails. I walked through the house, checking each camera, each lock, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I paused by Nora's photo on the mantel. "Tomorrow, love," I whispered. "Tomorrow, we end it." The snow began falling just before dawn, soft, slow, soundless. I put on a gray sweater, poured a single cup of coffee, and waited. At 9 sharp, Darren's SUV pulled into the driveway. Another car followed, a white county sedan. My pulse slowed instead of quickening. I stood, capped at the pen camera, and opened the door. "Morning, Dad," Darren said, bright and false. Behind him stood Martin Brooks, the county officer. I hadn't seen him in nearly 10 years. His handshake was limp, his eyes darting everywhere but mine. "Quite a place," Brooks murmured. "Shame to see it go." I forced a small laugh. "Everything goes eventually." They followed me into the dining room. I'd cleared the table except for a single mug and a neat stack of papers. Outside, somewhere in the neighborhood, an engine idled softly. The police van. Darren laid out the agreement. "Just a formality, Dad," he said. "Once you sign, the funds transfer. You'll never have to worry again." I took the pen, my hand trembling exactly as rehearsed. "If I sign this," I said quietly, "I want your word. It's all for family." Darren smiled, too pleased to hide it. "You have it." That single line, clear, confident, rang through the tiny microphone and into the recorder a few streets away. Chen, sitting in the van, leaned forward and whispered, "We got him." I pressed the tip of the pen to the page, letting the camera capture his grin, Brooks's nod, and my steady eyes. Then I signed, not my name, but a decoy signature Alicia had crafted. When I looked up again, the snow outside had stopped falling. The world was still, balanced on the edge of consequence. He thought I was surrendering. He had no idea I'd just closed the trap. The moment my pen left the page, the room went still. Darren leaned back in his chair, grinning like a man who'd just solved every problem in the world. Brooks gathered the papers, tapping them neatly on the table, his eyes darting between us as if trying to hide his own nerves. "Well," Darren said, exhaling through his nose. "That's it, Dad. You did the right thing. I'll handle the rest." I smiled faintly, forcing a tremor into my voice. "Guess I can rest easy now." He patted my shoulder, too hard, too familiar, and nodded toward Brooks. "Told you he'd come around. He's practical when it counts." Outside, the air changed. At first, it was just a low hum, barely audible over the furnace. Then came the sound of tires crunching gravel, a rhythm too steady to belong to delivery trucks. Brooks froze. Darren frowned and glanced toward the window. "Expecting someone?" he asked. Before I could answer, red and blue lights flashed against the glass. Tires screeched. Car doors slammed. "Darren Walsh and Martin Brooks," a woman's voice called out. "You are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." The blood drained from Darren's face. He turned to me, his voice cracking. Dad, what did you do? I folded my hands on the table. What you taught me, preparation. The front door burst open. Detective Chen stepped in, flanked by two uniformed officers. Her expression was calm, almost polite. Gentlemen, she said, you might want to stand. Brooks panicked first. This is a misunderstanding, he shouted, fumbling for his badge. Chen didn't flinch. One officer cuffed him while another read his rights. Darren stood motionless, staring at me as though I'd rewritten the laws of gravity. You set me up, he whispered. Chen corrected him quietly. No. He gave you a chance to tell the truth. You chose the rest. As they let him out, he fought against the grip of the officer, shouting, You'll regret this, old man. You think this house will save you? I didn't answer. The words fell away behind the sound of the car doors slamming and engines starting. Then, silence. A silence that felt like exhaling after holding your breath for months. Later that afternoon, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. Emily stepped out, her hair windblown, eyes red from crying. She'd seen the police cars on her way in. Dad, she whispered, rushing toward me. They said Darren, I nodded. He's gone. They'll take care of it now. She sank into my arms, trembling. You saved me, she said. I shook my head. No, honey. I just stopped pretending not to see. We stayed there for a while, the cold air wrapping around us. I could smell her shampoo, the same brand Nora used to buy. When she finally pulled back, she looked smaller, as if the truth had taken up space inside her. Was any of it real? She asked quietly. Love always starts real, I said. What people do with it, that's where it changes. She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks, and I guided her inside. A week later, I sat in a bright conference room at the Boise Police Headquarters with Alicia and Detective Chen. The coffee tasted better there, maybe because it wasn't laced with dread. Chen handed me a folder. Walsh and Brooks both confessed. Brooks gave us names. It's bigger than we thought. 3 counties, dozens of victims. You cracked the investigation wide open. Alicia smiled, exhaustion softening her features. You didn't just protect your home, Mr. Blake. You protected theirs too. I nodded, unsure what to say. Then I guess it was worth the sleepless nights. It was, Chen said. Go home, Mr. Blake. You've done enough. Spring came early that year. The snow melted fast, leaving the yard slick and green again. One afternoon, Emily showed up with a basket of muffins and that tired little smile that still reminded me of her mother. We didn't talk about Darren. We didn't have to. She sat beside me on the porch while the wind moved gently through the trees. The fence had been repainted. The house looked almost new again, though it creaked the same way it always had. I opened my old journal, the one I'd kept through every sleepless night, and wrote my final note. Justice doesn't heal everything, but it lets you sleep again. I closed the book and set it on the small table beside Nora's picture. Her smile caught the light just right, the way it used to when she'd say something simple and true. A home isn't walls and wood. It's what you defend when everyone else walks away. I think I finally understood. The sun dipped lower, washing the porch in gold. The air smelled of pine and paint. Emily reached for my hand. For the first time in months, I let myself just sit, quiet, steady, unafraid. Out by the gate, the old sign gleamed in the light, Blake Residence, since 1979. For the first time in a long time, it felt like home again. 6 months passed after the trial, and the rhythm of life returned in quiet, deliberate beats. The garden bloomed again, the fence gleamed with new paint, and the old porch creaked under the weight of routine. Darren was serving his sentence in a federal facility outside Helena. Brooks, ever the coward, had traded confession for leniency. Emily had begun to smile again. As for me, I learned how to live without waiting for the next knock at the door. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It breathed. The mornings smelled like coffee and cedar again. Some afternoons, I sat by the kitchen window, where Nora once read her gardening magazines, and watched the sunlight slide across the counter, soft and warm, like memory forgiving the present. When the Elder Justice Foundation asked me to share my story, I hesitated. Talking about it meant reliving it, but Alicia insisted. "People need to hear it, Mr. Blake," she'd said. "They need to know it can happen to anyone, and that they can fight back." So, one Thursday evening, I stood in front of a small crowd at the Boise Public Library. Most were gray-haired, leaning on canes or hope. The microphone squeaked when I started. "I used to think revenge was justice," I said. "Turns out, justice is just truth that finally stands up for itself." Silence fell. No rustling, no coughing, just eyes, hundreds of them, watching me. And for a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: belonging. When the applause came, it wasn't loud. It was steady, grateful. A man in a worn veteran's jacket shook my hand afterward and said, "You gave us courage, son." I laughed at the word son. At 69, it still sounded good. Emily came over every Sunday now. We'd go to Nora's old diner, the one with sticky menus and coffee that tasted faintly of smoke, and sit in the same booth by the window. The waitresses knew us by name. One morning, while stirring her coffee, Emily asked softly, "Do you ever miss him, Dad?" I looked out the window at the street, at people walking dogs, laughing, carrying groceries, simple lives untouched by deceit. "I miss who I thought he was," I said, "but that's not the same." She nodded, blinking fast. There was no bitterness in her face anymore, just understanding, the kind that takes pain to earn. "You always said people show you who they are eventually," she murmured. "They do," I said. "The trick is believing them when they do." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For once, we didn't need to fill the silence with words. That night, I sat at my desk, the same one where I'd once cataloged evidence and fear, and opened my old leather journal. Inside, tucked between dated entries, was a fresh page. I began a letter to Nora. "My love. The house is safe. The garden's growing again, just like you'd want. Emily's found her strength, and I've found a strange kind of peace. They said I was a victim, but I never believed that. Maybe I just needed to remember what you always said. A home isn't what you leave behind. It's what you fight for when you think you can't anymore." I signed it simply, Howard, and slipped the letter inside the journal. I placed it beside her photo, the one where she was laughing, head tilted back, wind in her hair. The next morning dawned golden and clear. The mountains glowed pink in the distance. I brewed coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. On the small table by the door lay a cream-colored envelope. The return address read, "Elder Justice Conference 2026. Inside was a formal invitation. Keynote speaker, Howard Blake. I chuckled, shaking my head. "You'd like that, wouldn't you, Nora?" I whispered. I looked out across the yard. The fence shone in the sunlight, the grass rippled gently, and a bluebird landed on the railing as if to keep me company. I didn't feel old that morning. I felt steady. For the first time in years, I locked the front door without looking back to see if someone might break in. The world outside didn't seem threatening anymore. It just seemed alive. As I walked down the steps, I heard my own voice in memory, quiet but certain. They came for my house, but what they really tried to steal was my dignity. I smiled, and that's the one thing I refused to sign away. The sun climbed higher, flooding the porch with light. I tucked the invitation under my arm and started down the path toward the mailbox. The sign at the gate caught the light just so. Blake Residence, since 1979. I paused, tracing the letters with my fingers. The paint was warm, the metal firm, the kind of permanence that comes only after a storm. And as the breeze carried the scent of cedar and morning coffee, I realized this wasn't just my home anymore, it was my story. In the quiet aftermath of any great storm, there comes a stillness that is almost sacred, the kind that allows truth to breathe again. What remains after betrayal and loss is not the wound itself, but the wisdom carved into the soul by survival. It's in those moments of reckoning that people discover what truly defines them, not the things they own, but the values they refuse to surrender. Justice, when it finally arrives, seldom looks like triumph. It's quieter, steadier, more about restoration than revenge. It teaches that dignity can't be taken by deceit or diminished by age. It can only be given away, and those who hold on to it reclaim far more than what was ever stolen. Forgiveness, too, grows differently after hardship. It doesn't excuse wrongdoing, but frees the heart from carrying the weight of another person's cruelty. A home, like the human spirit, endures because it's built on faith. Faith that truth will surface, that courage will outlast fear, and that even the most fragile beginnings can lead to resilience. Time will always try to erode what matters, yet integrity has its own foundation, unshaken by manipulation or greed. In the end, life is not about what we lose, but about what we choose to protect. It's about finding strength in the ordinary. Sunlight through old windows, the sound of peace returning after years of doubt, the quiet knowledge that standing firm was worth every scar. Because when the world tests what we stand for, the greatest victory is simply refusing to fall. These turning points remind us that setting boundaries and valuing ourselves is not just an act of courage, it's the foundation of living with dignity. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one lesson from this story that you feel connected to? And how will you apply it in your own life? Let's grow together by sharing our thoughts. If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, feel free to leave a 0. Your feedback helps us improve. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and spark reflection. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life with strength, honesty, and authenticity.